Hello, I'm Ed Ludwig for the Doylestown Historical Society. The Society is delighted to present, as I am to introduce, this interview on film of one of Doylestown's finest citizens, Milton Rutherford. The title of the interview is Milton Rutherford, Caught by the Camera, Doylestown's own photographer historian. And when you've heard and seen the interview, I think you'll agree what an apt title that is. Born in 1919, Milt is a native of Doylestown, and during much of the 20th century, he has observed and taken part in the development of the town. He truly merits being called Doylestown's own photographer historian. The interviewers are Barbara Dommel and Lynn Taylor, who themselves are outstanding Doylestowians. And the film was produced by Michelle and Chris Powell of Television, who contributed their services and to whom we're most appreciative. As usual, they've done a great job. Just a few words about the Society. Its mission is to preserve the history of Doylestown so that its persons, places, and events may long be remembered. This is the 6th video history the Society has presented. It also has sponsored 3 historical highway markers for Margaret Mead, Charles Sheeler, and it's just been awarded one to honor Jim Michener. The Society reprinted Wilma Reeser's wonderful handwritten book and has just published the 2nd issue of its newsletter, The Doylestown Correspondent, edited by Brooks McNamara. The Society is a part of Doylestown Borough government and is therefore qualified as a tax-free contribution recipient. And now, on with the interview recorded in June 1999.
Good evening. My name is Lynn Taylor, and this evening I'm privileged to be one of 2, Barbara Dommel and myself, interviewing Milton Rutherford, who is known to many of us here in Doylestown for many reasons, and we're going to find out most of those this evening. We're privileged to be conducting this interview in the Fonthill Museum, which both Milt and I have a great affection for. We're in the library. This building, finished about 1912, is a very special place. So it's a wonderful evening that I'm looking forward to. Milt, welcome.
Thank you, Lynn. It's great to be here.
Well, we're going to dig into your past and have lots of fun along the way. One of the things that I did find out a little bit ahead of time is when you were first born, you had quite a bit of notoriety. Is that true?
Well, yes, I got off to, I guess what you could say, it was a good start. At the age of 6 months, my picture was submitted to the baby contest, Philadelphia Record, and by golly, I came out with a first place blue ribbon.
That's fantastic.
And so that was a good start.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can see the photograph. You were quite a beautiful baby, and certainly with minimum attire.
Okay.
Okay, we'll leave it at that. Where were you born? Here in Doylestown?
Yes, I was born at 62 South Franklin Street in Doylestown, which is at the corner of Franklin Street and Mary.
Yes.
And the house is still there today with slight changes. And the picture that you will see here is a picture of myself and my sister sitting on the front porch. I was probably about 4 years old at that time. And my grandmother is sitting in the chair on the left side. Mm-hmm. And the house had been divided from originally one single house to a double, so that my grandparents could live next door in the next house. And you'll see there's a door there, and the front porch went into her side, and my family lived on, I lived with my family on the other side.
Very interesting. And that
Yeah.
house is still there today?
Oh, yes, yes.
How many years did you live there?
I'd say I lived there from about 1919, my birthday year, till about 1929 to 30 in that area.
And your family moved at that point?
Yes, at that point I lost a little track of for sure where we did go, but we were out in the annex for a couple years, and then finally up at the on Old Eastern Highway, where the airport is today, but right on the highway, my parents had a roadside stand there. It was called the Blue Gables, and the road stand where my mother served food, and we had 2 gas pumps there too as well in those days. I believe it was Richfield gasoline, and there were only 3 aircraft up at the wooden hangar at the airport, which was far from what it is today, and they had no facilities for gasoline up there, and they used to taxi those planes down the grade, which was considerable, from the airport down to the highway. And they would taxi the planes down with people walking along to guide the wings, and pull up in front of the roadside stand for gasoline. We used to put high-test gas in them, and then they would taxi a little harder to get up grade and back up to the field, and that's how they fueled their planes.
Oh, that's fascinating. And here we have a photograph of one of the planes from about that period. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's was taken in 1938 when we had long since departed from the Blue Gables, and in fact I think the building had been torn down by that time. But this was the first, and I might say last, airmail from Doylestown, but it was a celebration of sorts to fly letters from Doylestown to Philadelphia in view of the fact that we were celebrating the Doylestown centennial, 1838 to 1938.
That was quite a celebration at that time.
It was a big celebration, yeah.
For those newcomers to the Doylestown area, when Milt says Old Easton Road, at that time it was probably simply called Easton Road because that was the major north-south highway,
Yeah.
going from Willow Grove through Doylestown
To Easton.
to Easton. In fact, I think there was a trolley line that went along there also, wasn't there?
Yes, there was a trolley line that went up to Easton, that's right.
So the Blue Gables was out there on a major thoroughfare.
Exactly.
Yes,
Yeah.
it wasn't back off.
It would be what we today would be 611, Route 611.
That's right.
Yeah.
Of course, it still was way out in the country because Doylestown hadn't completely grown out to it at that point, I suspect.
Oh, no, that's very true. And there were times when I walked from there into school, which was about 2.5 miles.
Is that right?
Yeah, into the high school.
You probably can remember a few snowy days along the way.
Yeah, well, usually my parents would see that we got picked up, my sister and I,
Sure.
but it did happen.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, following that, I think you moved back into Doylestown, didn't you? And was that in your high school years?
Yes, we moved back into Doylestown on Broad Street at the corner of Broad and Mechanics. And again, my mother opened a dining room there for people to come to lunch from the courthouse. And we lived there for several years. I went through high school from that location. And then after high school in 1938, I opened a sort of a business at home. I had a dark room in the basement, and I went out and took photographs, and that's really I started right there at the house originally.
That's that 1938 date that we know about because of your anniversaries.
Exactly.
That come and continue to come.
That's right.
Is that wasn't your first store though? Is that right?
No, that would be following that, I kind of count that as my beginning in business because I did operate there and that was my occupation, so to speak. I was a year out of high school, and that proved fruitful. But then finally, I ventured to open a store, and I went to 52 East State Street in Doylestown, which for today it would be Market Way.
That's right. As you look down Market Way, it was the building on the left.
Well,
it's changed quite a bit over the
yes,
years.
as a matter of fact, changed quite a bit because the building was torn down when they built Market Way. And I rented there for a couple of years from Steve Arcade, and that's where I started officially with a store open to the public. And the picture here shows the show window. Looks like a Christmas scene.
I was gonna say, it looks like it's decorated for the
Yeah,
holidays.
yeah,
and
that's right.
It's a wonderful photograph. It almost is a classic of a store of that period. And for me to imagine that you were, what, barely, not quite 20 years old, or about 20 years old?
That would have been 1940, so I would have then been 20 to 21, yes.
21.
Yep.
What a great adventure to be starting a store at that age and looking at it. Certainly a well-established store from the point of view of the photograph, knowing that a young person starting a business, which of course now we know has, it's up to its 61st year, I believe.
That's right, it is.
The anniversary. That being in the early 40s, the war was just coming on. How did that affect running a store at that point relative to rationing and a lot of the issues that you had to probably deal with as a young person?
Well, of course, initially everybody had rationing, gasoline and everything, a lot of foods and what have you. And in the business, the supply of film and so forth was meager. But I immediately became involved with defense work in the war. And following Pearl Harbor in '41.
This is related to photography.
Yes, and also I did, at that time, blueprints. You may have noticed that on the picture of the store front. And we did blueprinting for a lot of aircraft factories in the area. And I got quite involved in defense work at that time, so that I moved from there because I didn't have enough room, and to our present location at 23 West State Street. But I was quite involved in that until 1944, on our first wedding anniversary, I was taken into the Navy.
Well, let me interrupt for a second. We've just made a quantum leap to something, so I want to find out about your bride. Would you tell us a little bit about Jean and how you met her? It's obvious it was after you started the store, but before you went into the Navy.
Oh, yes. Yes, we started dating back in about 1941. It was pretty close in there. And then we did get engaged, and we finally got married in 1943. As I said, just a year before I went to the Navy. And Jean and I both went to Doylestown High School, and but I was out 4 years ahead of Jean, and so therefore, naturally, when I was a senior, I couldn't date a freshman. That was unheard of in those days. But when things worked around, she became the apple of my eye.
Isn't that fantastic? She had studied art, I believe, hadn't she?
Yeah, Jean went to Moore Institute down in Philadelphia and studied art. And like I said, things changed quite a bit with the advent of the war. Things were a lot different. You couldn't just drive everywhere and so forth. You get, I think it was like 2 1/4 gallons of gas for an A sticker, and that didn't go very far.
I can imagine, especially living out here in the country, so to speak, a country town.
Right.
Well, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but now you're going off to the Navy. Who tended the store? while you were gone?
Well, Jean took over because she'd been helping anyway in the store, and she took over and ran the business the whole time that I was in the Navy, and continued with the defense work that was being done in the store. We were under surveillance by the 3rd Service Command, and we had to have tight control of things that we did in the building, anything that was extra prints or anything that had to be destroyed every day.
So there's a lot of security measures.
Yeah, everybody had to be fingerprinted and photographed, and in order to work there.
Well, here we have this wonderful photograph of you as a sailor. So this is the beginning of another aspect of your life at this point. Where did you go in the Navy, and what were you involved in?
Well, and it's interesting, Lynn, that that picture is taken on the premises where we are sitting.
Yes, I think I know where.
Out there at the garage, as it was at Mercer's building out back
I
there.
can see the railing to the
Yeah.
left. That's the steps that go
Right.
up to the garage.
Exactly. And so that kind of is an unusual tie-in. Little did I think when I'm standing there that in 1999 I would be sitting in here talking about the same thing.
That's right, and showing us that photograph.
Exactly. Well, I went into the Navy and went through boot camp and everything, and then I was finally selected to work in a photo lab, and the photo lab was connected with the Fleet Post Office, which was in New York City. When I say Fleet Post Office, that's for the entire Atlantic Fleet. That was the post office that operated, and all the mail and what have you for all the Navy personnel went through that building. It was a 10-story building located right at the end of the Holland Tunnel. And they had a photo lab there where they operated the V-mail.
Do you have an example of V-mail that you can show us?
I do,
Yeah.
and I'll explain to you how the V-mail worked. Sending letters and communications to people in the service and coming the other way was quite a big operation. There would be thousands of letters, and actually on a daily basis. And so V-mail, which stood for Victory Mail, was conceived, and people would write on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, single side only, one side had a red border around it, and you could only write within the contents of the lines. And those letters were folded up and sent to the Fleet Post Office to go on their way to an onboard ship or whatever naval base it might be. And overseas especially, very little as far as local. But those letters were all photographed on 16mm film. And a 100-foot roll of 16mm film, which was in a box about 4 inches square, and maybe normal 16mm width was about a ½ inch. But we could photograph 1,600 letters on that one roll of film, and then we would put all the letters that we had photographed into a bundle and catalog them, so we knew whether they all get an identification number. And that film was sent overseas or to the ship or whatever, and at that end they would reproduce from the film a half-size image of the original letter. And that's what we looked at here. It's 4¼ by 5 inches, 5½, which was originally an 8.5 by 11. And the thing of it was that they could put in a small mail bag thousands and thousands of letters that way, which would lighten the load. And this was very important because of weight and getting things shipped. And one of the things, of course, to keep up the morale was to get letters from home or get letters from the service people. And this certainly did a big job that helped that whole situation and got the mail through. And I did that the whole time I was in the Navy, right there in New York City in the photo lab.
That's fascinating, because that obviously was the beginning of the technology that we've seen grow today, right up to the email.
Yeah.
But prior to that, the bulk and the effort, especially with an overseas armed forces, must have would have been overwhelming.
Oh, yeah,
without
yeah.
using that technology.
It-
So there again, you end up in the service with the gift that you have and the profession that you devoted yourself to, being photography.
Yeah.
So they obviously found the right person at the
Yeah.
right place at the right time.
Yeah, and we did other things there too that was necessary in the Navy procedures, that the photographs that they needed taken, and pictures that they needed made up of all kinds. I worked at that as well, but that was predominantly what I did until I got out of the Navy in 1946.
In 46, good. And I think that's a wonderful departure point now to what I'd like to suggest is that Barbara Dommel, who is going to take the next segment of your life, you're not off the hook yet, to talk a little bit more about now having returned to Doylestown and the developing interest in many other aspects of our community here through the present. So let's take a moment, and I'll bring Barbara in to work with you.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Barbara Dommel, and I'm so pleased to share this time with Milt tonight. Lynn, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here tonight. We have looked forward to this for so long.
Oh, golly. Now just calm down, Barbara.
Oh, I can when
Oh,
I'm
my
sitting
goodness.
in your presence.
Oh, for goodness sake.
We would like to know how you started photographing the buildings in Doylestown. You have such an enormous history here.
Well, let's go back momentarily in history again to where I first got a camera and first started. And this didn't have anything to do with buildings. It just started my movement into photography. I had done photography in high school.
Okay.
And for a couple of years, I was in a camera club. In fact, I was the president of the club for 2 years, I think. And in that time frame, I one day bought a camera up at the Rexall drugstore, which is really in this picture where they were going to show you, was Hellier's cigar store at that time, up at the Monument, and it was at the corner of Shule Avenue and Main Street.
That's an amazing picture.
The amazing thing is the camera was a Univex, and the camera was 39 cents.
I don't think anyone could believe that.
And the roll of film that went in it was a 6-exposure roll in film size, similar to 35 millimeter today.
Right.
6 pictures on a roll, and the film was 10 cents. And this was all made in Belgium. The camera was made of Bakelite. This was the day before plastics. And I used that camera. I think the first time I ever used it was in 1935 when my brother got married over in Valley Forge. I took their wedding pictures for that. So that was how I really started taking pictures, and through school and coming out. But then when I was talking with Lynn and talking about Broad Street, where I did my first darkroom, what I did in those days was to go out and take pictures unsolicited of people's homes. I did a lot of night photography, time exposures, and I would take the pictures to the owner or the property owner and show them what I had. I'd blow it up to an 8x10, and 9 times out of 10 I was able to sell that picture.
How much did you sell it for? Do you remember?
Oh, a couple bucks.
It was a lot of money in
Yeah,
those days.
it was. But that's how it really got started. And as I said, all started with a camera. First camera would have been at the drugstore.
How long did you have that 39-cent camera? Do you have any recollection?
I could kill myself for letting go of it. I never had any thought about it. I'd love to find one someday. And in fact, a friend of mine that's in the antique automobile business did find one at a flea market somewhere around, and he sent me a note in the mail saying that he had this and he would swap it for my 1937 Cord.
Ooh.
And of course, he was
Such a
joshing
choice.
with me, but anyway, I don't have one. I wish I did.
Well, maybe someone in the audience tonight will have a line on an old Bakelite 39-cent camera. That would be wonderful, wouldn't it? Let's move along to the old high school.
Yes.
I know that you had wonderful memories of that high school. I know you met Jean as a lowly freshman in high school,
Yeah.
but she did catch your eye. And I'm curious to know how the high school affected your life. You had to walk in 2.5 miles.
Well, that was only on
Okay.
occasion, but when I did, when we lived out there at the airport,
Right.
some days my parents couldn't pick us up. My sister and I would walk, but that didn't happen very often. And then, of course, we did move to Broad Street, and then it was,
Made it a lot easier.
well, yeah.
Was
I
there-
could get out of bed last thing in the morning and be the last one to school.
Well,
like
I
where the
heard
bell
a
rang.
story. I heard a story you were late one day,
Well,
and that wasn't really allowed with the principal you had.
no, the principal we had was very strict, and the school entrances on Broad Street were two sets of stairs and 2 doors. One was
Okay.
girls, one was boys.
All right.
And you were not permitted to go up the girls' steps, nor use the inside steps either. They were boys. Well, living a half a block away, I would sometimes sleep until the first bell rang, and then I could jump out of bed and then grab a bun on the way out the door and hike it up the street and get in to school in time before the bell rang. And on this one particular morning, I've been getting away with this, but this one morning I went up, since the girls' steps were closer to where I lived than the other, I had to go around, you see. So this one particular morning, I ran up the girls' steps and went flying up the door and so forth, and Miss Lamb, the principal of the school, caught me, and she said, "Now, you shouldn't do that." She was very
bad
nice,
boy.
but she said, "Now, I don't understand why you did that, but you will go down the steps and come up again the right side." And she said, "Why did you do that?" And I said, "Well, because I would have been late if I'd gone up the right stairs to begin with."
Right.
So I did that, and I remember another time I got up into room A, the big senior home room, and Art Reese was a teacher that
I
controlled.
remember him well. He was the principal when I was to school there.
Yes, he was called the Great White Father.
That's exactly right.
Well, anyway,
Scared to death of him.
he would take the roll call for attendance, and this one particular morning, I was in several rows over, so that he doesn't get to me as soon as he had to go across the room in order to
Right.
mark everybody in. So I came in and sat down as he was halfway across the room, but he knew that I was late, so
Sure.
he made me take an excuse, tardiness blank to fill out, and it said number of minutes tardy, and I put a 0.
Oh,
And well, he got a little inflamed about that.
I can
Called me
imagine.
up there and said, "Why did you put down 0 when you were late?" Well, I said, "Well, it says number of minutes." And I wasn't even a minute. It was a matter of seconds, and there was no place to fill that in, so I put 0.
Oh, Milt, you're smart then and you're smart today.
Well, the school itself was very strict. They had,
Did they have a
Carmen-
dress code?
oh yes, Carmen Ross was the principal, and I would say he would be a little, would overdo it a little bit, because he was so strict that we had to wear, all the boys had to wear a coat and tie all the time, no matter how hot it was. And there wasn't even, in those
No
days, of course, they opened the windows, that's it.
Sure.
But you had to come to school with a coat and tie.
Were you ever allowed to take it off?
If it was hot enough that he felt that he had to take his coat off in his office with the electric fans running, he would send the word around that we could remove our coats,
That would be
but
very
not your
hot.
tie. You still had to wear the tie. And he was very strict with the girls, too, as to what attire. And when you think of today, which is absolutely the other extreme, I'm not downing it, but there's a fine line and a medium ground, which I think
sure.
we should use when you figure it's just two extremes at this point.
I would agree with you
Yeah.
on that, sure.
And you might be interested in the school, the fact that the stone part in the photograph was built in 1889, and then the brick addition to the left was constructed in 1912 to enlarge the school.
That's right.
And that was all 12 grades. You went there from first grade through senior high school. And
I'm sorry to say I attended that school, so I know full well how old it is.
yes, well, and at that time, students outside of town could come to Doylestown for high school.
Oh, they could?
Yeah, grade schools were outside of the town, but they could come to the high school by paying tuition.
Paying tuition?
Mhm.
How much was the tuition?
I have no idea. It was a matter of a few dollars, I would imagine, but at least they had to pay their way because they...
I can't imagine
Yeah.
that. I mean, today with the voucher system, it's
Yeah,
the new in thing, but
Right.
back then I wasn't aware of that.
right.
That's really interesting. I'd like to move from the high school down East Court Street a little bit to the courthouse, which was one of the most marvelous buildings in town,
Mhm.
in my opinion. I think we're looking at it now, and I think those steps have some meaning for you, don't they, as far as in connection with the high school?
No, the connection there mostly was that the school auditorium wasn't big enough for commencement.
Oh, correct.
And so the senior class would hold commencement into the courthouse, in the big circular courtroom.
I remember that well, actually.
Yeah, and
There's a wonderful steeple on the top of that courthouse which has a meaning to you, probably a little bit more meaning to Jean.
yeah, that was being the very high point in Doylestown. It was absolutely the highest point. And during World War II, it was used for airplane spotting. And people took turns to go up there because initially, especially, there was some apprehension that we could be bombed even in Doylestown because we
remember that
suddenly
well.
got into this and after Pearl Harbor. So
That
Gene
was a
went up there to it.
It was a Civil Air Patrol.
Yeah, but people just volunteered for that, and we had blackouts in town. Everybody had to.
I remember
it,
that
yeah.
well when the sirens went. My mother would come and get me in my bedroom, and I'd have to go in her bedroom, and my dad was out checking to make sure blinds were drawn. so
Yeah.
there was
No headlights
light.
on cars or anything like
Exactly.
that.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that was a little bit scary time, at least in my memory it was. I
Right.
was frightened
Yeah.
as a young girl.
Yeah.
And we're going to move to some more wonderful old buildings. I think we'll come on down Court Street to Main Street and take a look at the Fountain House, which, as you're well aware, is undergoing a tremendous renovation right now. And
Certainly is.
actually, Starbucks is on the bottom floor, but this is the most wonderful picture. And you actually have great memories of that, you and Jean, don't you?
Yes, it was one of, I guess you could say, three main eating places in Doylestown. And when you think of dining out, today I've been told there's 30 to 40 places to eat in Doylestown, counting the fast
Sure.
food restaurants. We had the Doylestown Inn and the Fountain House.
Right. The Slaughter family owned the Fountain House, I think.
Yeah,
Did they
but
not?
before that, the Moreau, Francis
Oh, that's
Moreau
right.
had it, and then
Yes.
the Slaughters had it, and then their daughter married Bob Taylor, and they ran it
Right,
until it
right.
closed. And might say that after it closed, it was for a short time a furniture store,
Right, that's correct, yes, I
and
remember that.
then that didn't last, and then it sat empty for a long time until Mellon Bank came along and fixed it up and opened it up as a bank, which was a great thing for Doylestown rather than having sitting there and deteriorating.
Absolutely, it's a huge building.
And that building dates back, according to the records, to 1748. Now, that does not mean that the building that you see it was 1748. it was a small building and has added on and increased in size so that it got to where it is today much later on, but it goes way back to 1748.
You and Jean used to eat dinner there.
Yes, we did. That was, as I say, one of the great places. Oh, the other place that I mentioned, there was another very popular place, and that was Ed's Diner for many years.
wonderful
Everybody loved
memories.
Ed's Diner.
That's right.
Whether you lunch or breakfast or dinner, whatever, it was good.
That's right.
But that was it. You didn't have the choice of all these places you have today.
There's a wonderful part of the Fountain House, which I think you have a picture of, that has a special interest to me.
I wonder why.
I can't imagine, Milt. I can't imagine. Why don't you expound on that a little bit?
I acquired an absolutely wonderful picture of the newsstand that was underneath the porch of the Fountain House on the Main Street side, next to the brick building there, which today I believe is a cigar
That's correct,
store.
right.
That little newsstand in there was so quaint and was way, way before, I guess, McLaughlin's opened up.
He was part of McLaughlin.
Yes, and it was Price's newsstand, and I was just a little kid then. Now we're going back to when I lived on Franklin Street. And the Depression. And on a Saturday night, Mother and Dad would send me uptown and with 25 cents or 35 cents to buy the puzzle of the week, which was a jigsaw puzzle with about 300 pieces. And I would get this puzzle and then take it home. And on Saturday night, our family would sit around and we'd put the puzzle together on a card table. And many times, that was our entertainment for Saturday night.
I'll bet, and listen to the radio.
And listen to the radio.
Sure.
And radio at that time was the thing. And of course, it was in black and white, not color.
Absolutely. I remember that too, I'm sorry to say.
Well, anyway.
I know with the pictures on the magazine, we had to get a magnifying glass. God bless Jean's eyesight on this. And it was 1922.
1922. You can read the magazine's dates, and they were 5 and 10 cent magazines. And it's simply a great picture. And one of my classmates from Doylestown High School gave me that one day. And
would you like to give him a photo credit, or you don't remember who it is?
I don't remember, really. Yeah. I'd have to, but I'm sure it strikes a bell with you, since you're in the newsstand business.
Oh, think about it, Mills. Let's move on down a little bit and take a look at the Lenape building, which is another wonderful building in this town that's been restored as well. And on the second floor of that building, there was something very interesting that I can happily say I don't remember.
Well, I can remember a couple things up there. The oldest thing I would say I remember was going there to the movies on the second floor.
It's amazing.
You went in the doors off of State Street and up quite a long set of stairs, because the floors in that building, when it was constructed, the ceilings were extremely high. So it was like 1.5 stories to each floor.
I see. Okay.
And I remember going up there with my sister. I don't remember what picture we saw or anything, but I just remember going there to the movies and complaining about all the steps it took to get up there. And then, of course, later on the movies moved out of there and went to where the county is today, and that was called the Strand Theater.
Do you remember the first movie you saw there?
I sure do. The first movie I saw there, a sound movie.
A sound movie?
Yeah.
Oh, we're growing up now.
Was John Bowles in Rio Rita, and there was music with that. And the old silents that were there, because before they had sound, where music was played by Mrs. Nicholas Power. She sat in the front and played the organ.
Do you remember how much you paid for that movie?
15 cents.
15 cents.
That was at the Strand when we went.
That's utterly amazing.
And another thing in the Lenape building, too, I might mention, was the bowling alley that was up there for a number of years.
That's right.
And which all the bowlers called the rock pile. It was not a very fancy bowling alley, but it did do the job for many years.
How many lanes did they have?
I believe there were 4 at that time, maybe 6.
Took a lot of space.
Yeah, it was where the movie used to be. That's
Oh,
where
be
it was.
darned.
Yeah.
Milt, we sit here tonight, your husband, you're a father, you're a grandfather, you're a town father. You wear a lot of father hats around here. And we're so lucky to have you. And we all strive to be the person you are, the person you represent. But I understand through Harry Steinbach that certainly in your lifetime you've been Peck's bad boy a few times. And I understand there's a cat story that's really interesting. And tell the truth on this one, Milt.
Well, all right. Once again, going back to the Doylestown Fairgrounds, and which was held every September.
You're going to blame this on the fairgrounds.
Yeah, why
Okay.
not?
Okay.
Now, they had sideshows there and different exhibits and what have you, but I remember so well when I was a little kid, and this is when we were living up at the Blue Gables up by the airport.
Right.
That this is the time frame. But I went to the fair, and they had this one, I guess you'd call it be like a sideshow, but they had a hippodrome built of wood around, and they had little racers in there with monkeys, and they
Real monkeys.
Yeah, yeah, and the monkeys drove these cars around higher and higher on the sides of this thing, and I thought that was wonderful. And the idea must have settled in because I went back out home to the Blue Gables in the next week, and I thought I could do something like that.
Okay.
So,
How old were you?
well, I would have been, let's see, that would have been around 1930. I've been 12, 14 years old,
Okay.
something like that.
All right.
My parents had a tent. We had a fairly large size with sides on it, and so you could walk around inside of it. And I built this little racer. It was about 2 feet long from wheels that I made from tin cans and blocks of wood, and made this thing look like a little racer. And I had a vacuum cleaner motor, which had took off an old vacuum cleaner. And they used to make a lot of racket. They ran at a very high pitch. But I had this thing for power, and I built that and put it on the back of the racer. And then I had to build some method to get power to the motor,
Right.
because I had a center post and a long arm hooked up to the racer, and it went around in the circle inside the tent. This whole thing was the idea that's going to make this so that when I got done, it would go around and people would pay a nickel to see it. When they
They're going
stopped,
to pay you a nickel to see
Yeah,
this wonderful-
admission.
Okay.
And when they came to stop for lunch or whatever at my parents'
Sure.
dining room there, they would be entranced to come back and see this. And so I got it all done, and I had revolving contacts that I made somehow out of things so that the car would go around and around. Of course, it had to be so it wouldn't twist the wire off. And this thing would go around in a circle. So the one thing was missing, I didn't have any monkey to put in it, of course.
That's probably
But
a good thing.
we did have kittens at that time. So I got this little kitten, and I put it in there, and I got the paws up, and I put the strap around the stomach and put it in there. And the cat was pretty cooperative until I turned on the electricity.
The high pitch.
And the noise was right behind the cat. And of course, there's the cat going around like this
No.
in a circle, and it was hysterical.
Did
And
anybody ever pay you a nickel to see
I
that?
got some contributions,
good.
and I
That's
guess I
good.
was a little inhuman to the cat, but
I hope you got the cat extra treats. I'm sure you did.
yes, I did.
That's a good thing,
Yeah.
honey. That's a good
So-
thing. Milt, I can't tell you how grateful we are for spending the evening with Lynn and I. And I'd really like to bring Lynn in now to finalize our wonderful evening with Milt. We're so grateful, and we've had such a good time.
And here we are, back together again. There is one little surprise I'd like to sneak in at this point, and it's a surprise that isn't going to be expected at all. I'd like to ask Milt if you have a photograph that you'd like to show me of maybe one of the family portraits that you might have taken over time. Do you have one here?
Yeah, I just happen to have one.
happy.
I took pictures, as I said before, went to people's homes and photographed children, interiors, Christmas card photos and what have you. And by golly, I looked through my archives and I came up with a 1938 photo of none other than Barbara Kenny.
No, you didn't.
And we're showing it to you
You
now.
did. I'm
Yeah.
not doing this. That's it.
Yeah.
I can't believe
See,
it.
when I said surprise, you thought it was someone
guys-
else.
I did.
Yeah, right.
That's not fair.
Well,
Okay, well, that's...
otherwise known as Butch Kenny,
Oh.
too. Don't forget
I
that.
haven't heard that in a long
that-
time.
Yeah.
I
well,
don't think we should say that on tape.
It's already on.
It's on, okay.
1938.
You guys will get it.
We're in big
You
trouble,
will.
aren't
You
we?
are.
Yeah.
Well, you see,
You
we
are.
can't conspire entirely against him. It has to go both ways.
I
Yeah.
see. Well,
Unfortunately, I'm out of the loop.
No, you'll be in the loop,
I'll
honey.
be in the loop.
Don't think I didn't think
Yeah.
about getting a picture of you.
Oh, thanks. With that, there's just one or two more statements that I'd like to make and a little something we'd both like to say to you, Milt. I know we all three agree this is a remarkable community to live in. You've raised your family. You're the second generation who's lived in this community. You've provided us with a third, and there's a fourth running around here. And in fact, we both have had the same privilege, and it's very special. And what you've done, the gift that you've given to us, not only with your talent, with your commitment to the community, the service organizations, your sense of humor. There's lots more stories that we're not putting on tape tonight.
We can't do it on tape.
On tape tonight. It's indeed a remarkable privilege for us to be part of this evening. And we both, I'd like to put the photograph up of you and your family with your Jeep in the background as our closing photograph. And the two of us simply have two words to say to you, Milt.
Happy birthday.
Thank you both so much. It's been a pleasure, I'll tell you.
So enjoyed it.
And I
Milt.
tell you,
Thank
this is
so
a
much.
great town.
Isn't it
Yeah.
great?
And you're a great
Lucky.
neighbor, and you've been a great friend.
Thank you.
We're so
It's a
lucky to have
privilege.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good.